is it. This is the beginning of our ancient 25-hour ritual, a day of fasting and introspection. We're freed from worldly concerns like bathing, food preparation, and the demands of daily life. We've carved a space to walk this path of our ancient ritual. We've set aside this time to see ourselves more clearly, to remember the many ways we have slipped and erred and injured others. For some of us, we must also atone for the ways we have harmed ourselves as well. We're here to beat our chests during the Vidui, during our ancient confession of wrongdoing. Our work each year remains the same, and yet the way we do it and the areas we focus on change. This year in particular, the onus of Teshuvah rests with each of us a bit more because we're physically distanced from one another. Normally, when we do this inner work, we find tremendous support in the people who surround us. When we look around and see 1,000 faces also engaged in self-reflection, it encourages us to greater honesty. It is as though seeing one another gives us permission to reflect on our failings. This year, there will be more time when we are on our own. I would like to invite you to use that more private time to dig deeper rather than turning away. Don't let yourself get distracted. One of the peculiar blessings of our global pandemic is how we have come to recognize that the old ways won't work anymore. Nothing about this day has ever been about business as usual. This year, all the more so.
Bishiva Shel Mala Ubishiva Shel Mata Al Dat HaMakom Ve'al Dat HaKahal Anu Matirin Leitpalel Im Havaryanim Bishiva Shel Mala Uvishiva Shel Mata Al Dat HaMakom Ve'al Dat HaKahal Anu Matirin Leitpalel Im Havaryanim Bishiva Shel Mala Ubishiva Shel Mata Al Dat HaMakom Ve'al Dat HaKahal Anu Matirin Leitpalel Im Havaryanim
In a moment, Cantor, Bitton, and Ilene Safyan will lead us in the Kol Nidrei prayers, which you can find on page 204 of our Neveh Shalom Machzor. And the prayer book provides plenty of commentary in the margins about vows and how Kol Nidrei cancels them. I encourage you to look at those comments and think about the promises you have made and failed to live up to. Since that material is there, I'd like us to focus on the previous paragraph, Bishiva Shel Mala, which states, by the authority of the court on high and of this human court below, we grant permission to pray with those who have transgressed. What's worth noting is how the language makes it seem like we are giving permission to those who have sinned to pray with us. Simultaneously, the people in our kahila we would imagine have transgressed are extending the same permission to us. And that's deep. It's deep because we all want to imagine that we're basically good people. Yet Yom Kippur is not a day to focus on what makes us right or good or justified. We have all those elements. We are basically good. No, this prayer, in its surreptitious manner, reminds us that we are all transgressive. We all err. We all harm. We all are broken. Tonight, we are given permission to pray with our own faulty natures. There's some radical self-acceptance in that, the sort that doesn't get us off the hook, but understands that by loving what is flawed in ourselves, its power to control us is diminished. Tonight and tomorrow, we have permission to pray with our whole selves. That's a blessing.
Bishiva Shel Mala Ubishiva Shel Mata Al dat hamakom ve'al dat hakal Anu matirin להתפלל עם עבריינים בישיבה של מעלה ובישיבה של מטה על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם עבריינים בישיבה של מעלה ובישיבה של מטה על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם עבריינים Kol Nidrei Vesarei Vacharamei Vekonamei Vechinuyei ושבועות דינדרנה ודשתבנה ודאחרים נא ודיאסנה נפשתנה מיום כיפורים זה עד יום כיפורים הבא עלינו לטובה כולו נחרת נבהון כולו ניהון שרן שוויקין שוויתין בתלין ומבוטלין לשרירין ולקיימין נדרנה על הנדרי וסרנה לאסרי ושבועתנה לשבועות
Kol Nidrei ve'esarei Kol Nidrei ve'esarei
Kol Nidrei,
Kol Nidrei,
ve'esarei,
ve'esarei,
v'charamei,
v'charamei,
v'konamei,
v'konamei,
v'chinuyei,
v'chinuyei,
v'kinosei,
v'kinosei,
u'shvuot.
Kol Nidrei ve'esarei Kol Nidrei
Tali, la sharirin vela kayamin.
Kol Nidrei ve'esarei, Kol Nidrei ve'esarei.
La sharirin vela kayamin vela kayamin nindrana la nidrei vesarana la esarei la nidrei vesarana la esarei
ושבועתן
La Shevuot.
V'nislach l'chol adat b'nei Yisrael, v'leger hagar b'tacham, ki l'chol ha'am b'ishtaga.
ונשלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם, כי לכל בשגגה, ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל, ולגר הגר בתוכם, כי לכל בשגגה, ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל, ולגר הגר בתוכם, כי לכל בשגגה. סלח נא לעוון העם הזה, כי גודל חסדך, וכאשר נתת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה, ושם נאמר, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך. ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך. ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
We just heard the haunting melody of Kol Nidrei. That's one of those melodies that sort of sticks with us and gets us in our kishkas. We turn now to the Ma'ariv service, which begins on page 207, which also begins with a melody that for me reminds me it's the high holidays. We hear that melody and it's meant to remind us that we're walking into a service together. But the words of the service are crowned by the words of the Shema, the words of the Ve'ahavta. They remind us, Shema Yisrael, listen. Baruch Shem Kavod, bless. Ve'ahavta, act in love. As we read and join together in the Ma'ariv service for Erev Yom Kippur, may we find ways to bless one another, to listen to each other, and to enact love.
בית ישראל עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו ושופטנו וקודמנו, נשיח בחוקיך, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו לאורך ימינו, ובהם נגן יומם ולילה לאהבתך. אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu malkeinu Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu malkeinu לחיים ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ותתננו בעצתו מלפניך והושיענו למען שמך. השכיבנו אדוני ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ותקננו בעצתו מלפניך והושיענו למען שמך. השכיבנו Adonai. Haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'hakol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim, ve'al kol ha'olam. Hashkivenu Adonai. Hashkivenu Adonai. Hashkivenu Adonai.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epic of belief, it was the epic of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period. With those immortal words, Charles Dickens began the famous historical novel of 1859, The Tale of Two Cities. The plot begins in the years before the French Revolution, and it ends with the Jacobin Reign of Terror, which was marked by massacres and public executions. During the period of this reign of terror, new Enlightenment ideas, beautiful, necessary, and fundamental humanistic ideas took hold and changed what people thought of as the role of government, its duties to serve its people, and the intrinsic value and freedom of each human being. At the same time as these ideas were spreading, the French Reign of Terror was also marked by horrific violence that spilled into the streets. Was the French Revolution a success? Did it achieve its goals of better government for its citizens? Is the history of the West marked by progress, the sort of progress that the French Revolution aspired to? If it is, then perhaps a bit of violence and social upheaval are worthwhile because they lead us to a better place? Or perhaps our focus should be on the last of the 5 stages of the French Revolution, the dictatorship of Napoleon. What if we can't look over our shoulder and see how far we have come? Then what use is today's unrest? Why on earth would we imagine that we can do better than previous eras who also had ennobling ideas about human freedom and equality? What if progress is an illusion, as those who condemn the American project and believe our country is founded on irredeemable foundations seem to believe? These are not academic questions for me. They're questions of my soul. They touch upon my emotional well-being, really my emotional angst. During this pandemic and the important Black Lives protest movement that has followed, our nation's social distress has been reflected in my inner distress. Can you relate? I think you can. I've not been at ease, and so many of my assumptions about who I am as a person, my role as a husband, a father, a rabbi, have been called into question. I'm going through what a Catholic poet once described as the dark night of the soul. And based on my conversations with so many of you, you too are going through your own dark night of the soul. Something challenging. You too are feeling uneasy more frequently. We are all going through something necessary, deep, and difficult. Defining that uneasiness is, well, not easy. What I can say is that I've gone through a great deal of introspection. I've grabbed hold of my dark night, and at this juncture, I can say that while my worries remain the same, the way I carry them is done with much greater equanimity. I've been seeking what I can only call spiritual freedom, and I think I've made some progress on the journey. I hope you have as well. On the holiest night of the Jewish year, every one of us is called to embrace our inner darkness, which leads us to the light. That darkness is a challenge of seeing ourselves as we really are. The light flows out of the spiritual freedom we find when we face our darkness, and that in turn allows us to feel more settled in these unsettling times. I want to explore this concept with you because there's a terrible hunger for spiritual freedom in our nation, and we're trying to sate it by turning to politics, which is a bit like fighting windmills. To explain this concept of spiritual freedom adequately, we first need to talk about political freedom. Political freedom seeks to change the outer world of relations. Spiritual freedom seeks to change the inner world, the relationship we have with ourselves. In Judaism, that relationship is called Ben Adam Le'atzmo, and it is one of the areas of teshuvah that we are invited to repair during these days of awe. Ultimately, it leads us back to change relationships with the world and others. So let's spend a few moments talking about political freedom so we're better positioned to understand why spiritual freedom is so important and why sometimes it might even need to precede the political. The first profound political lesson I had occurred by happenstance. Did you ever overhear a stranger say something that changed your life, or at the very least, it instantly seared itself in your mind? Growing up in New York, that sort of thing would happen with some regularity. And attending college in New York City, I would hear things on the streets, in the subways, in the small jazz clubs I attended. There's a level of interaction with strangers there that is both infuriating and endearing. But maybe strangers are supposed to have an outside say in our lives, because sometimes you might actually be meeting Elijah. It was one of those sorts of moments when I heard an old black man say to no one in particular, "The only freedom what matters is freedom from the police." The only freedom what matters is freedom from the police. That single phrase burned its way into my mind, and it's been there ever since. I suspect part of it was that as a skinny white 19-year-old Jewish kid, I never suffered much interference from cops. But anyone with a heart open to listening could hear in those words a depth of experience that could not be denied. Here was a man who was sharing a hard-earned truth. He'd been hassled by the police. The deepest sort of freedom he could imagine was to live unmolested by the authorities. In an age where we're having serious conversations about defunding the police and repurposing those dollars into social programs, that snippet of conversation keeps echoing in my head. The only freedom that matters is freedom from the police. I didn't have language such as Black Lives Matter back then, but that's what the stranger on the street was teaching me. Black lives matter. And when the state's use of police force is not impartial, when hassles and use of force fall more indiscriminately on black bodies, then yes, the only freedom that matters to some is indeed from the police. And there are other sorts of freedom that people are hungry for. Over the summer, I've gone downtown on several occasions. A couple of times I ventured into the nighttime protests to see the beating, bleeding heart of my city and to stand amidst the pain and anger. I've also taken to heading downtown during daylight hours. There are fewer people, and more opportunity to have substantive conversations with some of the protesters. There are people who want greater economic equality, even to the point of seeking a revolution. I've met utopians who believe that in the new coming order, people who grow food will readily share it with others, and that a more natural human generosity will surface. More than once, it was said that in a just society, police wouldn't even be needed. On a couple of occasions, I've also seen angry people attack one another, not in the midst of a large protest and not by those who are trying to undermine the cries for justice. No, there are some people who are so furious that their rage spills out of them with no identifiable object. The last time I came downtown, it felt like the New York of the 1980s, I remember, when every stroll on the street carried with it an element of risk and danger. I saw the aftermath this time. A man bleeding, his attacker running around screaming, and the police showing up almost immediately to tend to the wounds of the injured victim. In these visitations, the questions I really wanted answered were, what will it take you to get off the streets? And what will it require for you to feel okay about this country and society? People could offer me abstract, theoretical, utopian answers, but not concrete answers. No one could tell me what policies, if implemented, would make people feel safe. No one could give me a practical answer about what economic equality really means. I don't think this is accidental. The people I have met are passionate, concerned individuals, the sort who are vested in this country, who are trying to imagine what the America they want looks like. There are two questions and two reasons why what it will take to end the protests and what will it take for you to feel all right go unanswered. One is because our political tools are imperfect and limited. The other is that ultimately, people are not looking for political freedom, or not only looking for political freedom. There are two profound verses in Deuteronomy which can explain this and help us begin making the shift from political freedom to spiritual freedom that we Jews are called upon to do during this, our season of Teshuvah. In Deuteronomy 15:4, we read, "Efes ki lo yihye becha evyon, ki varech yivarechecha Adonai ba'aretz, asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha nachala l'rishta." There shall be no needy among you, since the Lord your God will bless you in the land that God is giving you as a hereditary portion. And then, just a few verses later, in Deuteronomy 15:11, we read the complete opposite. Ki lo yagdal evyon mikerav haaretz, for there will never cease to be needy ones in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to needy kinsmen in your land. How can this be? How can God in 1 second say there will never be impoverished among us, and just moments later tell us that human need will never be eradicated? Some of our classic commentators come up with clever solutions. If we build a just society, then the impoverished will disappear and no one will be hungry. And that, by the way, is a political answer. But then the same commentators continue and say, since we're incapable of building a completely just society, there will always be needy individuals. One way to read all of human history is as a story about the changing nature of our economy. From hunter-gatherers to farmers and fishers, from barter to money, from artisans and craftspeople to industrial production, from factory workers to information age workers. At each new turn, new jobs arise that require new sets of skills, and not everyone can get trained. Not everyone is temperamentally suited for the new world. Not everyone has equal access to the tools that will allow them to adapt. And some, like the African American, struggle against a system that perpetually seems stacked against them, regardless of the economic model in vogue. So Deuteronomy 15 is correct. We can't ever fully resolve the paradox between God's promise that there will be no hungry and God's description that there will always be human need. We can build the most just society imaginable, and within a few verses or a few decades, we will discover that the impoverished remain. That might sound discouraging, but please remember, Judaism has never nurtured a sense of infallibility. Our greatest leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, is denied entrance into the land of Canaan for his sins. Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, have to leave their utopian garden because of their failings. And we, the Jewish people in the Torah, are always on the way to the promised land, but we never arrive. To be human is always to be in motion. Politics can't answer how to live with this dynamic turmoil, because politics can only answer the art of the possible, that which can be measured or legislated. Politics can move us along the path toward justice, but it will never take us all the way. For justice is a spiritual value, a value of meaning that gets applied in the political realm, but exists apart from the realms of power. That's why I think the protesters I have spoken to can't answer or decide what would be sufficient to get them off the streets. When I look at our country today, there's so much pain, so much loss, so much struggle. The parts that can be alleviated in the public square must be, and as Jews, we are obligated to take part in that work. Vote, engage in Tikkun Olam, roll up your sleeves. Let's work together as a people and as a nation. And still, what people are desperate for can't be fully explained or answered by political freedom. Which brings me to Aisha. Aisha is an African-American woman with vivacious eyes, crisp cornrows, and a quick wit. When I asked her these same questions, she didn't give me a political answer. Aisha believes that what black people and what Americans need and are missing is nationality and a divine creed. By nationality, she means that black bodies were stolen from their countries of origin and never really given American nationality. Humans need a sense of belonging. We need to belong to a place and know that the place belongs to us. The security of identity. And by divine creed, Aisha is highlighting the spiritual hunger and loss of purpose that so many people are struggling with. A society in which we can acknowledge that we are all God's children, each with a divine mission. Listening to Aisha, I was reminded of Viktor Frankl. Do you remember him? He was a Holocaust survivor, a neurologist, and a psychologist. What he learned in the Shoah was that even in the worst human conditions possible, some people thrived. In those horror-filled concentration camps of wanton murder, destruction, starvation, some humans flourished. What gave those people such spiritual freedom that their souls could remain free in a place of slavery and torture? Frankl identified that a fundamental human drive and need is to seek and create a life of meaning. So profound is this human need that even the inhuman conditions of Auschwitz were insufficient to snuff out those who were able to generate meaning while walking through a living hell. That is a rather profound form of spiritual freedom. Their example, as profound as it is doesn't explicitly tell us how to do this Ben Adam Le'atzmo work on Yom Kippur or in the days to come. Nonetheless, knowing that some found spiritual freedom in a place like Birkenau can provide us encouragement to create our own purpose-driven lives in the bleakness of this contemporary moment. That is an important and hopeful message of its own. Let's then revisit the Jewish American psychologist Abraham Maslow. Some of you may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is often visualized as a pyramid. The bottom of the pyramid has survival goals such as security, connection, and self-esteem. The upper portions of the pyramid address other human needs, such as exploration, love, and at the top, self-actualization. In moving through these stages, a person would experience self-actualization as the pinnacle of human experience. There's only one problem with this model. Maslow didn't create the image of a pyramid. Rather, his hierarchy of needs was first visualized as a pyramid in some management textbooks, according to the psychologist and podcast author Scott Barry Kaufman. Moreover, the highest human accomplishment for Maslow was not self-actualization, but self-transcendence, spiritual freedom, in other words. According to Dr. Kaufman, not only did Maslow believe that self-transcendence was the goal of human life, but he also believed it was an experience, not a destination. Human growth is never linear. Life is so much rockier than that. If there's anything the last 6 months has taught us, it's that. A better way to envision Maslow's model is as a sailboat in the middle of a vast ocean, because we are always in a state of becoming, and the closest shore is far from view. We never fully resolve any of the stages he outlines. We endure setbacks, and fear can strip away many of our feelings of security and self-esteem, as well as prevent us from pointing our sailboat in the direction of growth. Dr. Kaufman says it so beautifully, so let me quote. Every now and then, when we're really catching the wind, when we aren't preoccupied with our basic needs, and we're moving purposefully in a direction with the spirit of exploration and love, we can experience transcendence. Transcendence goes beyond individual growth and allows for the highest levels of unity and harmony within ourselves and with the world. Transcendence, which rests on a secure foundation of both security and growth, allows us to attain wisdom and a sense of connectedness and synergy with the rest of humanity. As those souls of Auschwitz taught us, the security we need to do that work may be far less than we imagine. With so little, those prisoners managed to limit their preoccupation with their basic needs and seek their own freedom of spirit. Heroic, heroic. And that's why these are the best of times and the worst of times. A season of light and a season of darkness. A spring of hope and a winter of despair. Humans' internal progress is not linear. Progress exists and doesn't exist. We take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes we take 2 steps back and 1 step forward. The Jewish master story of the Torah is that we never reach the promised land, not in the political realm, not interpersonally, not even in our relationships with ourselves. We're always becoming, always seeking safety and new understandings that will make us uncomfortable and unsafe, always failing and falling and picking ourselves back up again. We all know these things. We just don't always live from the center of our knowing. Spiritual freedom arises when we accept and acknowledge the rocky shoals and stormy waters within our psyche and in the body politic as well. When we don't, when we imagine that the next social movement or the next election will eliminate the turbulence of being human, then these indeed are the worst of days, because we enslave ourselves to an impossible dream. We live from a place of disappointment and judgment. We strengthen our anger, specifically the chronic anger which defines our nation at this moment and separates ourselves from others and ourselves. In many Jewish communities, Yom Kippur is the happiest day of the Jewish year. How can that be? How can it be that when we're hungry and unshowered and tired and peering into our own darkness, purpose, wisdom, coming to terms with the broken imperfection that each of us carry in our core, being human, listing into the wind, that's spiritual freedom. It's not a little thing. It is a core experience required for a deeply and fully human existence. And that makes all the difference. May you continue to move toward the blessing of spiritual freedom. May you get yours. May we all. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we all be inscribed for a good year, and Som Kal, an easy fast to each of you.
On page 223, we turn to the repetition of the Amidah for Erev Yom Kippur. It's not a real repetition, it's a reminder of the themes. And it begins with the piyut, Ya'aleh. And each verse goes through the same pattern. Ya'aleh, ve'yavo, ve'yera'eh. Let us rise up, let us arrive, and let us appear. Ya'aleh asks us to lift up one another, to be present with each other, and to see each other as human beings. Page 223.
Koleinu miboker v'yerael Koleinu v'yerael Koleinu ad arev ad arev ad arev.
הנשמה לך
והגוף פועלך, הנשמה נשמה לך, והגוף שלך, הנשמה נשמה לך, והגוף שלך, הנשמה נשמה לך, והגוף שלך.
כי הנה כאבן ביד המסתת, ברצותו קץ וברצותו מחטט. כן אנחנו בידך מחייהו ממוטט. לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר. לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר. כי הנה כהגה ביד המלאך, ברצותו קץ וברצותו שילח. כן אנחנו בידך אל טוב וסלח. לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר. לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר. כי הנה כירייה ביד הרוקם, ברצותו מאשר וברצותו מעקם. כן אנחנו בידך אל קנו ונוקם. לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר. לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר. כי הנה ככסף ביד הצורף, ברצותו משגשג וברצותו מצרף. כן אנחנו בידך ממציא למזור טרף. לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר. לברית הבית ואל תפן ליצר.
Hello, everyone. Glen Coblens here, speaking to you from my home in Southeast Portland. Not the vision I had for my first opportunity to address our incredible Neveh Shalom community. I would like to start with a Facebook post my wife, Mia, forwarded. A woman wrote, "Sometimes I just want to stop. Talk of COVID, protests, looting, brutality. I lose my way, become convinced that this new normal is real life. But then I meet an 87-year-old who talks of living through polio, diphtheria, Vietnam, protests, and yet is still enchanted with life. He seemed surprised when I said that 2020 must be especially challenging for him. No, he said slowly, looking me straight in the eyes. I learned a long time ago to not see the world through the printed headlines. I see the world through the people that surround me. I see the world with the realization that we love big. Therefore, I just choose to write my own headlines. Husband loves wife today. Family drops everything to come to grandma's bedside. He patted me on my hand. Old man makes a new friend." The writer continued. His words collide with my worries, freeing them from the tether I had been holding tight. They float away. I am left with a renewed spirit. My headline now reads, "Woman overwhelmed by the spirit of kindness and the reminder that our capacity to love is never ending." So I ask you, what do you want your headline to be for 5781? Ponder that as I talk about mine. Since becoming president in June, many have commented about how bad our world is right now and asked how it feels to be president during a pandemic. To be honest, I have never looked at it as a negative. For my 30+ years of coaching, I have learned challenges are opportunities, and the greater the challenge, the greater the reward. Through coaching, you learn how to research, review, and learn about your opponent. Then develop, teach, and implement your plan. all with the goal to compete and ultimately defeat your opponent. I much prefer to look at the positives and what is possible. So my headline reads, New President Embraces World Challenges, says, bring it on. Why am I so confident? What makes me feel so strongly that we will not only get through this, but we will be strengthened because of it? 3 reasons. There is no team, there is no I in team, and we have a great team. I know it's a cliche, but staff, clergy, lay leaders, volunteers, and you. While you are the only one going through what you are going through, you are never alone. Not in this community. Your Neveh Shalom family is here to help and support you in any way we can. We are stronger when we are together, and we are blessed with an incredible staff, wonderful clergy, dedicated lay leaders and volunteers, and all of you. Headline, together, Congregation Neveh Shalom remains connected and strong. Number 2, we entered this phase in a position of financial strength. As I've said before, thanks to you and your generosity, we completed a successful CNS 150 Funding Our Future campaign in 2019. And normally, the President's remarks are known as the Kol Nidrei appeal, which you'll be pleased to hear I am not going to do. You're welcome. However, I do need to say a few words about our budget. While this will be an extremely challenging year financially, our dues and current annual giving campaign are going well, and I hope that this continues. Thank you to all of you who have made your commitment and to those who will do so in the coming weeks. Headline, generous community invests in long-term future. And finally, our children. As the Talmud says, our children are our guarantors. After attending several B'nai Mitzvahs recently, I can confidently report we are in good hands. Headline, this generation gets it. They understand they have an opportunity to create systemic change and are not backing down from the challenge. Each in their own way, special way, they have expressed and acted upon what they believe is right, whether that be following common sense practices to keep everyone safe or standing up for equality, fairness, justice, and love. Kol Kavod to this year's large and incredible class and their families for looking at their simchas from the perspective of the glass is half full. 5781 begins with numerous challenges for us all. We crave human interaction and, well, Zoom just isn't enough. We hope you enjoyed our back to shul drive-through and our second day Rosh Hashanah family time in front of the Torah. Sukkah is just around the corner, and thanks to our men's club, we will again have the Sukkah in Holzman Plaza. Please make sure to follow the links in your emails to register if you want to schedule a time inside during the holiday. Our staff, clergy, lay leaders, and volunteers are thinking creatively about how we can both follow government guidelines and mandates and connect in person. If you follow our Wednesday morning e-blasts and or visit our website, you will see numerous classes, programs, and events to engage our diverse community. And there is much, much more to come. Besides our B'nai Mitzvah and Shabbat services, Foundation School and Aliyah are off to strong starts. Thank you to our stellar education team for not only developing a comprehensive and detailed plan, but executing and showing just what is possible. Over 100 of you joined in our first 2 town halls. I look forward to seeing many of you in the ones to follow each month. Headline for CNS, better and stronger together. United, the spirit of Congregation Neveh Shalom soars. What is your headline? L'Shana Tova. May 5781 bring health and happiness to us all.
of El Melech Yoshev and the 13 attributes on 229. Did you ever mess it up so bad that you thought your friend, romantic partner, spouse, parent, or child would never forgive you? Have you ever betrayed someone or broken fundamental trust with someone? If you have, you know it's not always easy to regain that person's forgiveness. In some cases, you might not even get another chance to make things right. Part of the Torah's power is how it reflects even on painful moments such as ultimate betrayal. The prime example of this is the episode of the golden calf. Even though God was with the Israelites in Egypt, helping us earn our freedom, even though they experienced the miracles of God's love directly, when Moses delayed his return from the mountaintop by a few short hours, the people in their anxiety fashioned an idol, a golden calf. Now, from the perspective of the Torah, there's no sin worse than idolatry. It is the ultimate example of bad faith, of living without gratitude, of turning our back on the one who has always been with us, and the fact that we live in a moral universe. Taken metaphorically, the incident of the golden calf represented Israel having an affair behind God's back. After messing up so badly, so fundamentally, it's no surprise that Moses is worried. In the aftermath of that act of betrayal, however, God teaches Moses the 13 attributes, what is known in Hebrew as the Shlosh Esrei Midot. Each of these speaks of God's unbelievable kindness, and this formulation holds pride of place in our festival services, not just on Yom Kippur. According to our interpreters, this prayer indicates that God is compassionate before and after we screw up, and that God is compassionate to all creatures, giving them what they need. God is kind and gracious and slow to anger. In our ancestors' moment of greatest fear and anxiety, God rises to the challenge of forgiving us for a fundamental betrayal. Wow. By the 13th century, this powerful statement of God's love for us is inverted in a book called the Shnei Luchot HaBrit by Rabbi Horowitz. He recovers its meaning for us and says, this passage means that if one acts according to the pattern of these midot, of these attributes, and is compassionate, merciful, and forgiving to one's fellow creatures, God will be that way with us. For these reasons, one of the powerful moments of the High Holiday service is the recitation of El Melech Yoshev al Kisei Achamim, that God dwells and sits on a chair of compassion. When we do the right thing, the universe tends to repeat that goodness for all eternity. May each of us learn to be compassionate, even with those who have done us wrong. We turn to page 229 and rise.
13 כמו שהודעת לעניו מקדם כמו שכתוב וירד אדוני בענן ויתייצב עמו שם ויקרא בשם אדוני. שמע קולנו אדוני אלוהינו חוץ ורחם עלינו. שמע קולנו אדוני אלוהינו חוץ ורחם עלינו וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה השיבנו אדוני אלוהינו ונשובה חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם. כי אנו עמך ואתה אלוהינו אנו פניך ואתה אבינו אנו עבדיך ואתה אדוננו אנו קהלך ואתה חלקנו אנו נחלתך ואתה גורלנו אנו צונך ואתה רוענו אנו חרמך ואתה נוטרנו אנו פעולתך ואתה יוצרנו אנו רעייתך ואתה דודנו אנו סגולתך ואתה קרובנו אנו עמך ואתה מלכנו אנו ממירך ואתה ממירנו.
Last summer, I was privileged to attend New Cage, where I learned with the brilliant Jewish educator Eliana Light. She started her session by asking us to take our hand and knock like we were knocking on a door. What happens when you knock on a door? If you're lucky, someone opens it. She then asked us to take our hands and tap on our hearts. And then she taught us these words: tap, tap, tap your heart, tap, tap, tap your heart, tap, tap, tap your heart. On Yom Kippur, it's time to restart. That is the melody that we use for the words of the Yeshamnu, which we recite now on page 235. I invite you to use your tap not as a beating, but as a knock, as an opening for the ways in which we may do just a little bit better in this new year.
Ay, 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 Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi, He'evinu, V'hirshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafalnu sheker. Ay, 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 Yatznura, Kizavnu, Latznu, Maradnu, Niyatznu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Tsaranu, Kishinu Horef. Ay, 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 Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiavnu, Tainu, Titanu. Ay, 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 Sanu mitzvotecha umimishpatecha hatovim, velo shava lanu, vater tzadik al kol haba'aleinu, ki emet asita, ve'anachnu hirshanu.
One time in Toronto, I went to see my vocal coach, David Dunbar. And David Dunbar had many students, Broadway type students, musical theater, pop, and Jews, secular, not and religious, conservative, Reform, Orthodox. And this time I walked in and he had another student, an Orthodox guy, a Chassid. And so I sat down on the couch and I waited for the lesson to be finished. And at one point, the student Shimon was his name, and he sang this Ve'al Kulam that was really quite beautiful. And I asked him at the end of the lesson, that was a great Ve'al Kulam. Do you mind if I record you so that I can use that myself? You see, I'm a cantor. And he beamed. And he said, I'd love it if you did that and if you took that melody. You see, my grandfather composed that melody. He was the famous Rabbi Yosele Mandelbaum. Now, Rabbi Yosele Mandelbaum was a famous cantor, started off his career in Krakow, Poland, and he was there for 17 years. Later, moved to New York. and was a famous cantor there. But he was, so the grandson, Shimon, who I was talking to, was telling me Yossele Mandelbaum, his grandfather, was the famous cantor in Krakow, Poland for 17 years until he was taken by the Nazis to a concentration camp. And I forget which one. And he said to me, so his grandfather was taken by the Nazis to a concentration camp, and his grandfather composed this melody. And not only that, he composed it on Yom Kippur. And here we are today, honored to be able to sing and share in this beautiful, heart-wrenching, inspiring, soulful Ve'al Kulam.
Ve'al, ve'al kulam, ve'al kulam, Elo haselichot, selach lanu, mechal lanu, selach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu, selach lanu, mechal lanu, selach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Ve'al kulam, Elo haselichot, selach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Ve'al kulam, Elo haselichot, selach lanu, mechal lanu, selach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu.
Avinu malkeinu, choneinu vaneinu. Avinu malkeinu, choneinu vaneinu, tien banu masim. Avinu malkeinu, choneinu vaneinu. Avinu malkeinu, choneinu vaneinu, tien banu masim. Hasei imanu tzedaka v'chesed. Hasei imanu tzedaka v'chesed ve'oshienu. Hasei imanu tzedaka v'chesed. Hasei imanu tzedaka v'chesed ve'oshienu. יתגדל ויתגדל שמרמה בעלמא דברכיותי וימליך מלכותי וחייכון ביום אחד וחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן יש מרבה מברך לעולם ולעלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמדקדושה בריחו לאלה כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דנירן ועלמה תושבחתה Israel, קודם אברהם לבישמעיה, דבישמעיה, ואימרו אמן. עושה שלום עם רומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל. ואימרו
Erev Yom Kippur, final words of parting. As we prepare to part, let's recall the story of the two kittens who spied a big pot of wonderful creamy milk. Smelling its sweet goodness, they jumped first onto a stool and then into the pot, where they began to lap up the sugary milk. After they satisfied their desires, they attempted to jump out of the pot, but discovered it was too high and the walls too slick. As much as they meowed, no one came to their help, and nobody heard them. One of the kittens fell to crying in despair, and in that despair sunk into the milk and drowned. The other kitten wanted to live, and so leaped repeatedly at the sides of the pot. Each time this kitten slid back down. Even so, it never despaired, and instead continued its attempt to escape. Out of that refusal, something curious occurred. The creamy milk was churned into butter, and the butter was just solid enough for the kitten to climb upon, and from that perch to leap out of the pot. We follow our desires, our impulses, our moods. They are like sweet things that aren't always good for us. In some ways, they form walls around us and imprison us like that pot of milk. It would be easy enough to assume that we can't overcome the hold they have on us. That's the moment when we drown in our bad habits, when we lose our resilience and belief in change. May we each be that second kitten, churning our weakness and reshaping our flaws so that they lead us to our best lives. Som Kal. May this fast help us in that holy work. Som Kal.